take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all here. I was out extremely late last night, so if I seem a little tired, that's why. I actually left to go somewhere at like 9:15 p.m. Yeah, it was a wild night. I had a 10 o'clock appointment, and I actually laughed driving there because it's just funny how much your life changes over the years. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going somewhere at 9:15 at night. And it felt like 2 a.m, which was hysterical to me. It's not even why I brought this up. I'm just talking about it now because I brought it up. But it is funny to see how like over time your life just changes. And especially I'll talk about that in a second, but I was going into the college area, which was kind of basically where I grew up. And so, I used to go nowhere until 10, 11 o'clock at night in that area, going out as a teenager or whatever it was. And here it is at 9:30, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so old, so tired. I don't want to be going anywhere. But it was really kind of funny. And then I got there. The reason I bring this up is it was stayed at KCR Radio. And so one of the students who's been coming to the Wednesday night meditations for the last, probably a year and a half, I don't really know her all that well, but they have a show, and so they asked me to be on it, and their time slot, and I've been on their show before, other people's, but not at 10 p.m. at night. So even when I put it into my calendar, it's 10 p.m. at night, it just seems so odd. And it was also a reflection for me, as I said earlier, to recognize how our life changes as time goes on and as we age, and different priorities and different things we do with our time, and how we spend our time, and what that means for the rest of our time. But the reason I bring it up is, one of the things that we kind of talked about and discussed is, for people who are not raised Buddhist, which is many of you in this room, most of you in this room, in fact, the question was coming from, parents of the host, Chantal, who was raised Southern Baptist, and let her parents know that she was going to this Buddhist meditation thing on campus. And I think they got kind of worried about her. And so she even said, like, for my parents who are probably listening to this show, basically help me out here. What is this Buddhist thing all about? And one of the things that we reflected on a little bit before, and then during as well, was that so many things, whether it's religion, whether it's advertising, whether it's, the Starbucks line, whether it's the clothes you're buying, everything is telling you what you should be and how you should be, and what you should buy and where you should go and what you should look like. And I talk about these things a lot, but everything in our culture, in our society, in our world is telling you what to be and how to be. And for me, really the heart of meditation specifically, and then it kind of gets woven into Buddhist practice, is instead of being told to be a certain way, you're actually getting quiet to just listen and pay attention to how you are. And these are two very big things. And what that means is if you're a diehard Southern Baptist person, then you can listen to what that means, right? If you are someone who likes to buy lots of clothes, then you can listen to what that means. So it's not about drastically changing things. It's about waking up to what are you doing? Why are you doing it? How do you do it? And how does it impact you and those around you? And so driving home, I was really reflecting on that a lot, that it's really cool for me, to have kind of stumbled into this thing many years ago that put me in a situation to actually just pay attention to everything. And I don't know about you, but I'm probably not the only one in the room that grew up not paying attention to too many things. How many of you like to pay attention to things? I see about 5 hands, good work, right? But most of us, we just kind of go through, and we're really fed so much information from the outside world that conditions us to be a certain way. And at the end of the day, we don't even get to know what is ourselves, who are we? Now the trick and the cool thing is for those who are brand new to Buddhism is that the Buddha came along and then says, so you spend all this time trying to figure out who you are, and then the Buddha said there is no self. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for coming. You can all go home now. And figure that out the rest of your life. So we'll start with a meditation practice now that everybody has arrived. And a couple things to tell you before we begin, for those who might be brand new. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away, most likely. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. You're not going to figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Most important, don't judge your practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on the cushions, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the shoulders to relax. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the benches or chairs, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands resting gently, knees or lap. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. And throughout the practice, you'll hear sound. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. The mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, or the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with our own mind and our own mind's reaction to an external condition. And what we realize from the practice of meditation is this is our entire life, every single day. Things happen, we react. More stuff happens, more reactions. The Buddha called this pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us in this room is if we think about how we responded to the last 20 minutes, and we compare that to how we respond to everything else that happens throughout our day, it's usually quite a big gap. And so all we're working on is closing that gap to where the way we feel now is closer to how we feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives, but with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not the escape that often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation isn't going to fix that. As I spoke about at the beginning, it begins to help you become aware of what you think and what you say and what you do with every moment of your life. Because what you think and say and do is what creates the crazy, hectic, stressed out mess that you may be living with. Now, if everything in your life is perfectly peaceful and calm and happy, then I'm not really sure why you're here, but glad you're here anyways. All right. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's it. You know, it's interesting. For me personally, I love when phones ring during meditation. You know, I often want to I know too many of you. I wish it happened more often, but that means most of you will probably tell somebody to call you at 10:15 or 11:15 on a Saturday morning. So please don't do it intentionally. But that was a really fascinating experience for me. And then I'll just kind of share it because the first thing we heard, and if you didn't hear it, it doesn't mean you were in a deep meditative state. It just means you were sleeping. And that's fine too. You know, sleep is all good, right? I definitely could have used more of it last night, but you know, sleep is helpful. But so the phone rings, and our thoughts start going. There's a phone. Why is it ringing? What's that ringtone? I don't like it. I'm trying to meditate. Whose phone is that? How come they didn't turn it off? You know, whatever. Most people probably created some story in their head about the phone ringing. Now, the first question on that is, how many people thought, oh, that poor person probably feels so embarrassed right now? Well-trained people you are, you know? There's a very simple example of when things happen, we often immediately think, how does that impact me? Right? Now, again, those of you who've been around here long enough or heard me long enough talk about this kind of stuff, you know, you kind of get some of this. If you're brand new, this is something to look at. As the phone rings and we think, oh, that ruined my meditation. How could somebody not turn their phone off, right? The practice is, oh, that poor person probably feels miserable right now. They're so embarrassed. They're so ashamed. They're hoping nobody knows it was them. You know, I don't know. I'm making stuff up. You don't know what's going on in somebody else's head. Maybe the person didn't care, right? It doesn't matter. But the reality is we don't know what's going on in the other situation. We often reflect on, what does that do to me? And then immediately following that, 5 seconds, a car drives by. And that car fascinates me. It's in the neighborhood. It goes by every single day playing Tibetan Buddhist chanting. So if you've never heard Tibetan Buddhist chanting, now you have. That's what that was. And I don't know, I've seen the car. Every time I hear it, I kind of run outside. Travis and Maggie were always looking you know, who is that? You know, do they do it intentionally during meditation? You know, we don't know. But that car is in the neighborhood every day. And it's Buddhist chanting. Y'all heard that, right? And so that was Buddhist chanting. Hang on, no question yet. And so that was Buddhist chanting. So me, I'm cool, Buddhist chanting. You know, I was hoping they would have stopped at the stoplight or stop sign and just keep it going. because who couldn't use a little more Buddhist chanting in their life, you know? And then maybe about a minute after that, I chimed in with, if your mind is wandering, recognize it, come back to the breath. So all we had there was 3 individual situations, all producing what we call sound. They were all just sound. There was no difference in any of them. There's a great teaching by Shunryu Suzuki. It's one of the, if not the only actual filmed teachings of him at San Francisco Zen Center. And he's talking about the difference of noise versus sound. Brilliant teaching. He's talking about the birds chirping. But right now we're talking about a phone ringing, Tibetan Buddhist chanting, and my voice telling you to come back to breath. Just sounds. But what we do, and this is the heart really of Buddhist teachings to me and why we struggle so much, is we set up these constructs and ideas and boxes and judgments and expectations of how we think everything should be. So most people, especially if you're here for the first time, didn't come into meditation thinking like, okay, my box or my idea for meditation is going to be phones ringing. It wasn't in your construct that you created for what meditation is supposed to be like for you. You had an idea. That idea was different, but it probably had to do with some sort of silence and not a phone ringing. So if a phone rings, it didn't. Thank you, Cynthia. That's so beautiful. You can answer and talk. I don't care. That's phenomenal. So if a phone rings, right?
I feel terrible, by the way.
Right?
My face is red.
Right? There we go. These are just things that happen. And even that, right? So you might feel terrible. But in that instance, it was funny. Because I just said if a phone rings and then it rings and we're not in meditation. But if it happens during meditation, people are like, oh no, there's a phone. How dare they, right? So even that's a perfect example of the idea that we set up, right? That's our whole life. You have an idea, a box, a construct, some sort of package that you think your life is supposed to be. And when that doesn't align, it bothers you. And that's going to be that way the rest of your life. Unless you begin to kind of open up that construct you've set and learn to experience things as they are, not as how you want them to be. Now, those of you who've heard Tibetan chanting or don't mind Tibetan chanting or like that sound, when that sound occurs, it's like, cool. So we go from disliking a phone potentially to liking the Tibetan chanting. There's a 50-50 chance on that. And then the third sound was me saying something. Now that is totally acceptable in your mind, probably. Not because it's me, but because you're at a meditation and I'm sitting here and I'm leading it. So you 100% expect me to say things. Unless, of course, you're like some deep Zen practitioner and you hear for the first time and you thought it was going to be completely silent. And then your thought was like, wait, why is this dude saying something? But for the most part, we expect this to hear a sound. We're maybe okay with that because it was odd. We don't like that. All 3 of those things are no different. They're sounds that occurred. And if you can now carry this into your life and begin to recognize it when you go through your day today, the judgmental mind, the mind that discriminates likes and dislikes, wants and not wants, all of these things are the reason that you struggle throughout your day. And you can apply that to the way you view yourself. You can apply that to the way you view others. You can apply that to your jobs, your families, whatever it might be. We put these heavy expectations and labels and judgments around all of us, as opposed to, and to me, that's what the Zen practice is. It's experiencing the present moment as it is. It's experiencing, there's the sound of a phone. There's the sound of a car. There's the sound of somebody saying something during meditation. That's it. But we let them kind of penetrate us and emotionally dictate how we're going to be for the next 12 years. So with that, I'll stop. Always prefer just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. I saw a hand in the back about 10 minutes ago. I don't know if it's still relevant, but.
Yeah, it is actually. I thought it was pertinent that you mentioned the fact that deeper meditation is a greater level of conscious, not that you're actually drifting off or way out there somewhere, but you're actually more aware of the moment of yourself, especially. So
Yes. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And again, to me, that's how I've, through Buddhist teachings, learned the meditation practice. It's not the getting lost in some, la la land. It's fully present with this moment as it is. And we have a very difficult time throughout our day doing that. So we don't practice being present with things as they are during meditation just to do it when we're sitting in a meditation group. We practice that so when we go into our lives, we're fully present with the things that occur in our lives all day long. Some of them we like, some of them we don't like, some of them are neutral. In Buddhism, we often say pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So, but just experience them as they are and be with them. So, thank you. Yeah.
One thing that helps me is when I hear a sound during meditation, which I always do, is to name it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it drops out the way. Because if I let it go, I start telling stories about it.
Definitely.
The naming it just sort of like identifies it. That's it.
Yes. We hear the phone ring and it's a some ringtone, and then we start judging the ringtone, judging the volume of it. We start getting into all these stories. What's my ringtone like? Should I change it? I don't know. Yeah. What else? Thoughts, questions?
At the end of your guided meditation, you normally end by saying, recognize if you feel better, worse, or the same after. I was wondering if you ever have stretches where you don't feel better after, like what keeps you going?
Yeah, I think it's actually really funny. It was something actually that Alyssa, current DBT, Alyssa president, wrote recently. And she said when she first started doing meditation, she really loved it. And then there was a period of time where it was like she would actually leave feeling worse after meditation. And that was because maybe there were greater challenges in her life at that moment, right? And then it was eventually reflecting on the recognition that, yes, there are times when you sit in silence, that if you're in a rough patch in your life, which we all go through, and you sit quietly for 20 minutes and do nothing, that sucks. Definitely. And I think it's important to understand that, as you know, you've heard me talk about this for a long time, that the meditation isn't going to change that or fix it or make it go away, but it actually helps us be with things as they are. And very often, I'll just use the emotion, anger, for example. If I was really angry and I sat for 20 minutes, the 20 minutes didn't necessarily get rid of the anger, but what it stopped me from doing was acting on anything coming from a place of anger. So while the anger may have stayed the same, I didn't do anything. And doing things out of anger leads to nothing good, right? If the emotional, pain is stress, anxiety, fear, worry, sadness, depression, heartache, whatever that pain is that we're feeling, the practice is to just feel it. That's it. And know that in time it will pass, maybe by, 8 o'clock tonight, and maybe by the year 2022. We don't know, but it will pass. And it's also a very good reminder, again, for anybody who might be new to meditation or, not really sat here before, that to not think that just because you meditate, that means all of a sudden everything's going to be great. And there's that kind of, I think, misconception often that people have that means that you're going to feel better after meditation. And yeah, you may feel worse. But the alternative, I don't find beneficial, which is, well, let me rephrase that. If you do find yourself in a place in your life where you're in a, kind of a rough spot, maybe don't sit as long, right? If you're used to doing maybe a 20-minute meditation, just sit with the pain for 5 minutes and say, that's enough. Be with it, feel it, be real with it, and then say, I'm good. I'm going to get up and walk away from this right now, and I'm going to go distract myself and watch Netflix for 4 hours because I'm going to feel better. So don't force yourself to be with the torture. So find a balance. That makes sense? Yeah. Find a balance. Yeah.
I remember in the beginning you seemed to contrast Buddhism with other religions or ways of life that tell you what to do or how to be.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if Buddhism has no guidelines or rules as to how you should be a good Buddhist or a good person.
Sure. No, they all do. That's good. You pay attention. Smart. So let me ask you this. So during the 20-minute meditation, did you fixate on anything other than that? That smile tells me no.
No. I mean, I did.
Were you wrestling with that in your head?
Yes, a little bit. But
Yeah.
I also was paying attention because I want to have an open mind.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. Yeah, and to be very direct, the way that I phrased that was probably not the best way to phrase it. It was a little bit out of context, based on the conversation that I'd had with Chantal about this, and the conversation was around the fact that she was, really growing up, was raised and told this is how you must be, and that created a bit of, and I've had this dialogue with thousands of people, and that created a bit of kind of, resistance often to religion or certain ways that seem to be telling you how you must be, or this is what's going to happen to you, right? It creates a lot of fear in people sometimes. And so Buddhism, absolutely. And it's really interesting you said that, because even after I said it, there was a little kind of, I've been doing this long enough, a little tick in my mind that said, you probably should have said that better, right? So I'm really fascinated that you caught that. But Buddhism absolutely has, the Buddhists spent 45 years telling people how to live. So it absolutely has all those things. The thing about Buddhism is that they weren't rules. They weren't, if you do this, this is going to happen, right? It was pay attention to why you're doing this and recognize what happens from it, right? And so we talked about this last night, and always great on a college campus, but the very first in Buddhism, they're called precepts. So the Buddha had 227 to 311 precepts that he created for the Sangha, for the community of monks and nuns, right? Are you aware of any of this, or no? You're hearing this for the first time?
I'm only familiar with the very base information of the religion, so
Okay, but the whole precept thing is brand new to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So think of precepts as red lights. You drive?
Yep. Well, not here. I ride in my car as a freshman, but.
Oh, there you go. Right on. Just because you're a freshman.
Yeah.
That's weird. But anyways, so when you drive wherever you are and you get to a red light, what do?
Stop.
Why?
Fear of retribution, I suppose.
Fear of retribution. Do you have to stop?
Depends. Is there anyone around?
We would have been good friends when we were 18. You have a future, my friend. It's sitting right here. I hate to break it to you, right? But look at the way you answered that question, right? It depends. Is there anyone around? The question was, do you have to stop? That's a very simple yes or no answer. Do you have to stop at a red light?
Yes.
Really?
Well, I mean, if you want to follow the law.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question. Do you have to stop at a red light? Nobody-
I'm still gonna say yes.
I'm still going to say you're wrong.
It's an option.
It's an option. It's a choice based on all the things you just said, right? The retribution, you don't want to get in trouble. You could get caught. Maybe you'll get into a crash. Maybe you hurt somebody. You choose to stop at a red light. But there's nothing that forces you automatically to stop at a red light. Make sense?
Yeah.
You can ponder that later. But that's the general idea, is that you are making a choice to stop at the red light. The precepts are the same way. The Buddha created the precepts for people to choose to follow these guidelines because he felt that they were the safest things that he could roll into a community. And it wasn't like he sat down and said, here's a bunch of rules you all must follow. He watched what went on in the community. And as the community grew, he set up precepts based on something that happened. So one, for example, would be somebody ran a red light and crashed. Or somebody, went through an intersection and crashed, and somebody one day said, you know what, we should probably create this red light system. I don't know the history of red lights, but I'm guessing they were created for safety, right? The precepts are the same thing. Now let me talk about the first 5. No lying, to refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. Don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, don't have sexual misconduct, and don't use intoxicants, right? Do those sound similar to any other core religious teachings you ever heard in your life? Very similar, right? They're all there in Buddhism as well, right? The way the Buddha taught it was be aware of when you do these things, what happens to you and what happens to those around you, right? But they weren't judgments. They weren't, this is where you're going to go if this happens. It's like you're creating your life. So if I want to lie, kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and use a bunch of intoxicants, that's my choice. But my life is going to be a mess, as is everybody else's. So it was very much about living your life in the moment, not so much about what's going to happen when you die type of stuff. And he was also very clear that Buddhism is a way of life, even though it's practiced very much religiously around the world, especially in Western context. Nobody here is Buddhist other than a handful of people, right? They're not here to be Buddhist. Sitting in this room right now, you got Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, pagans, and those who are against all of that. But what you have are people trying to find a sense of peace and happiness in their life and putting some of these things, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, generosity, morality, patience, all these things that the Buddha taught, they're there. And we can choose to follow them or not. Does that help paint the picture a little bit?
Yeah. Just to clarify, so
Sure.
that means they're more of suggestions rather than objective right and wrongs, but the Buddha suggested them because he thinks that would be the best case in the end.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, to give it a little more context, he was asked about gods and goddesses, right? This is India 2,500 years ago. So 500 years before Christ, everybody believed in Hindu gods and goddesses. Everybody, for the most part, believed in rebirth, reincarnation. And they asked him about gods and goddesses, and he said, I'm just a human. I can't tell you about that. I don't know. But I'm going to suggest, using your words, this is how you should live your life if you want to end suffering. Okay. And I'm also pretty sure that if we followed the things that for the most part, every religion taught, we would also end suffering, right? So I'm not one who thinks like the Buddha said it better than anybody else. I'm pretty sure Jesus was a pretty enlightened bodhisattva dude who had great wisdom, Yeah, and then go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I agree with that. I agree with that, they all have commandments or laws or rules or whatever, but I think the interpretation that happens and the dilution that happens when men take over religion, which I see so much less in the Buddhist tradition, it just keeps going back to just, think good thoughts, do good deeds. Speak good words. Okay? And I noticed, like, being raised Catholic, I was taught not to worship false idols.
Mm-hmm.
This would be like, I would have been a Catholic school child just freaking out.
Right.
But what I've seen as I get older is the false idols that I think that, in my interpretation, that God or Jesus, whoever was talking about, was money, ego, power, all the things that hurt people. These can't hurt anyone. They're just there to inspire and bring us to love. And I think that with Buddhism, it's so base. It's so, this is the thing. When I was a Catholic, I was, sent to confession every Saturday to confess that I talked back to my parents, and I was felt to be made feeling a horrible person. I think that for me, and I can only speak for myself, the true meaning of every religion, like you said, they all have the base. But if it was at the base, if men didn't get involved and said, we can't worship false idols, but those false idols are power, or money, or ego, or anything else that you put in front of the universe, what is really good, and then, be good to each other.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, well, two things. One, I would have spent my whole life in confession, first of all, then, if that was would put you in confession every weekend. And two, there's still too many men leading Buddhism. We need more women. So, yeah, I'll add that as well. Still predominantly men. Yeah. But thanks for sharing that. And it's absolutely true. It's all the foundation of love and kindness is really what it's all about.
Thank you,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, you said we're all practicing Buddhism here, but for you, where do you go into I'm Buddhist? I don't want to get
Yeah.
too hung up with semantics,
Sure,
but it's
sure.
just kind of interesting to me, I don't know what really that.
Are you looking for what defines one actually as a Buddhist?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Do you want me to swear you in or something?
No. I'm just curious about it.
So I'll close with this thought. We're just about out of time here. Is if you didn't hear, basically what makes one a Buddhist, right? And I'll say a couple things on that because it's a common question. It's in people's minds a lot. And especially for me, as I call myself a practicing Buddhist. And if my mother and father are sitting right here, I call myself a nice Jewish boy. So it really kind of depends on where you are. My master used to say you could shave your head and put on a robe, and that doesn't make you a Buddhist. Right? It's what's in your mind and what's in your heart. He also used to say you could recite, when you chant, you could recite the name of the Buddha, you could recite the name of Jesus Christ. It's what's in your mind and what's in your heart that makes you a Buddhist. So I think that was the most important lesson I learned about what does it mean to be Buddhist. Early on, myself, like many, we get wrapped up in kind of the trappings of Buddhism. We think if we say certain things and go certain places and bow certain ways or wear certain clothes or whatever it might be, we give Buddhism a box. Just like I talked about earlier, we have our little Buddhist box. And we have in that box what we think it means to be Buddhist. And if we check off all those boxes inside the box, then we're a Buddhist. In Buddhism, there is no box. You completely shatter the box. Right? I will add that, traditionally for 2,500 years, since the time of the Buddha, you have ordained monks and nuns that go through, and each tradition is not a simple answer, especially with the church bells ringing, but it's not a simple answer. Each tradition, each culture is different, right? In the tradition that I come from, the Taiwanese, Chan and Pure Land practice, you have monks and nuns that are ordained as monks and nuns as early as 12 years old, and they stay monks and nuns their entire life. And it's something that you vow to be a monk or nun your entire life. You are a Buddhist monk or Buddhist nun. You have some traditions, say Thai tradition, where it's common in that tradition for the younger folks to do a short-term ordination and become like a monk for 3 months or 3 weeks, something like that, right? So each culture is different. There is a very heavy, long line and lineage of Buddhists all over the world, going back to the time of the Buddha. The way I introduce it and share it kind of locally here is really my first answer. Don't be concerned with being a Buddhist. Be concerned with being the person that parents probably taught you to be when you were 5 years old. And that will make you the greatest Buddhist in the world. There is also, just to add, because I know some of you are aware of this, you can go to Buddhist temples, traditional cultural Buddhist temples, and you can go and take precepts and take refuge in the Triple Gem. We've had ceremonies in the past, we'll probably do them again, and actually take formal refuge ceremonies with the master and get a Buddhist name and get a little certificate that has your Buddhist name on it. But again, you can do all those things, and then you can walk outside and treat somebody like crap. The names, the different Dharma names, the different certificates, the different robes, they're just things. But they're also things that are important because they can inspire you. When I first took precepts, I probably broke all of them within the first 2 weeks. But they reminded me and continue to remind you and inspire you to do it. So they're just some things to think about. Definitely not an answer, but that'll lead you to your next question. Yeah. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Dylan during his time of rebirth and his family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace.